Let's get to our top story as we go to Columbus, Indiana, as that's going to take us to Cummins and Hyliion in their attempt to go to natural gas engine certificate. Sorry.
So we've got Alan Adler here with us, our Detroit Bureau Chief, who, Alan, you've covered Hyliion a lot. We've talked about them kind of from the get-go. Of course, Thomas Healy doing great things there, and this partnership with Cummins is really exciting. Talk to us a little bit about the natural gas engine.
Well, the gas engine, the natural gas engine, that engine has been around for a while. Interestingly enough, that's what Hyliion has been using all along. The significance of this is that now Cummins, which really is a threat to Hyliion's long-term existence, is now going to partner with Hyliion to help get the 12-liter natural gas engine certified with CARB in California and ultimately with the EPA. What this does is it saves Hyliion, which is a startup, a SPAC-led startup, saves them a lot of money in terms of having to pay for the certification work all by themselves. Obviously, Cummins is the main provider of natural gas engines to the entire industry. And by essentially working with Hyliion, they're saying, hey, you know what? You've got at least a good transitional technology, if not a long-term play here. And seeing these two together is both a surprise and not a surprise, Kaylee.
I love this. It's like Hyliion's almost like, man, we don't want to get beat by them, so like might as well join them, right? And when you talk about that being the surprise, can you elaborate on that a little bit as well? We know that kind of the goal of Hyliion, right, is to be that kind of transitional space into the hydrogen space eventually too as well. But sitting here in this natural gas, it's a good alternative to go from talking about purely diesel fossil fuel reliant onto more of a cleaner burning fossil fuel, right?
Right. Well, yes, you do have benefits from natural gas in terms of a lower emission profile. If you go to renewable natural gas, which isn't petroleum based, then of course you could be looking at net zero carbon. So there's and that's something that Thomas Healy has talked about quite a bit. Here's the thing: I don't believe Hyliion went to Cummins about this. I think that the way they came together, and it's interesting because I was down at Columbus, Indiana, a couple of weeks ago with the Cummins people, and when I brought this up, I asked about Hyliion. I said, you guys could basically just, they have to be on sale at this point, given their stocks, selling at less than $5 a share. You could just snap them up. Why wouldn't you do that? Obviously, you could do this work yourself. And I got a lot of pursed lips in response, and a lot of people who said, yeah, they're kind of an interesting company, which should have told me and did tell me that something might be afoot. This is not an equity investment or anything like that on the part of Cummins at this point. I mean, Cummins has a very large pending deal for $3.7 billion to take over Meritor. So there's a lot going on there, but this is just the beginning. I know Thomas Healy hopes this is just the beginning of a relationship with Cummins. Here's the thing. Cummins is a threat to Hyliion in terms of its first product, that is Hyliion's first product, which is basically an electric boost for a natural gas or diesel truck. Cummins has a 15-liter natural gas engine, over-the-road engine coming that'll start production in 2024. That, and Healy has acknowledged this, is a direct threat to Hyliion in terms of that first product. So all the focus at Hyliion is on this Hypertruck ERX, which is the electric and natural gas truck. As you said, Kaylee, eventually they want to run hydrogen in that. And interestingly enough, a candidate to provide the hydrogen in an internal combustion engine really is Cummins. They're working on that for their 15-liter engine and presumably could apply it to smaller engines as well. This is a few years out, but it's something that suggests that there could be a longer-term relationship between Cummins and Hyliion. And why does this matter? It matters because we're starting to see a weed out, really, of SPAC transportation companies. We saw a bankruptcy for Electric Last Mile Solutions a few weeks ago, liquidation bankruptcy, and you've got some others that are hanging on that need more money. We've got a fascinating situation going on with Nikola right now around trying to get more share authorized. They've been doing everything they can to get that approved, and that will be decided this week. So the idea of keeping some of these young companies alive with the money that they need is is going to be bear watching, and you've got all kinds of different things at play. So for Hyliion, which has about $527 million in the bank on its balance sheet right now, they're probably looking at a pretty good survival story. They've also got a lot of deposits for their truck, which will be out in 2023. Now, they're not making the truck, they're making the powertrain system.
And Alan, as we look at this industry, do you see that there's a lot more pressure starting to build up on some of these companies needing to start to produce actual physical products and get them out on the road, or get a little bit further than, a test or an announcement? Because it seems like it's kind of been pushed back further and further, but is there any kind of mounting pressure starting to build up for them?
Well, I think, Hyliion itself had to delay its Hypertruck for a year. They just fell behind, and they, had issues with supply chain, which of course affects everybody. So, they've had to delay things for a year. It looks like they might be okay. You've got some others that, quite honestly, we're seeing this throughout tech now, where you're seeing a lot of layoffs and, cost cutting and things like that, because as the market continues to struggle, the valuations of these companies are really under pressure. There's only so many ways that you can advance and get something out the door faster. I mean, a lot of these are R&D type activities until they're ready for prime time, so to speak. You see that with autonomy to some extent. You see that even in the companies like a Proterra, for example, which makes charging stations and does electric buses. They've been under a lot of pressure, even though the business itself, I think, is looking pretty strong. So, it's interesting, that they all are sort of struggling with this market, and it'll be a question of will they have enough resources to continue? And again, I'm not picking winners and losers. I'm just pointing out companies that quite honestly have been brought more to the fore because of some of the things that they're doing. The Nikola vote this week is going to be fascinating, because they had to suspend their annual meeting because they did not have sufficient votes to pass this proposal to increase the number of authorized shares by about a third. Now, why this all sounds like business gobbledygook? It's not. This is very important, because those shares are what the company has for flexibility in terms of raising money to ultimately scale the business. And if they don't get that done this week, then it's going to probably take them a year until they can get it done. So we'll be watching that very carefully. But the Cummins thing, it's good news all around, really, for Hyliion, because, with their ties to Meritor, they've got a lot of former Meritor executives in their management team. And, of course, Jay Craig, who was the CEO of Meritor, is on the Hyliion board. They're in pretty good shape, really, as far as, Cummins becoming Meritor's parent, and, having Hyliion kind of as a, under its wing, so to speak, at least in this one instance. So you kind of have to like this for Hyliion.
Alan, I want to go back to what you said about the SPACs kind of hanging on for dear life right now, right? This is kind of a trend that we're seeing really all around freight, no matter if you're in freight tech or if you're in alternative fuels technology or if you're in EV technology. If you're a company that kind of capitalized on the hot market last year during this time, and you launched your SPAC and maybe you did it a little hastily, now you're trying to find yourself in this position of hanging on for dear life, right? And if you're a company who's maybe held back on either looking at going public through SPAC or IPO, you're kind of sitting there and you're saying, whoa, let's like pull it back and let's maybe not look at this too soon, because the market's just not supportive for that. Do you think that this is kind of just a general overall market trend that we're going to see through the rest of the year, and that those companies who maybe SPAC'd early got in when it was good and they'll have the ability to survive, versus those companies that are now looking at it, they need to hold back and hold off?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot in that question, and I think I would start with the fact that in any scenario, you're going to have winners and losers, right? You're going to have some companies. We saw the first one in electric last mile solutions go under. There was some shenanigans at play at that company, but so you're going to have some that won't survive a shakeout. You do have companies. It's interesting. Kodiak Robotics is a good example here. They resisted the idea of going public via SPAC. They have managed to raise some money, about $125 million, about 6 months ago. And so, they're proceeding, they're hanging in there, and they don't have any of that hangover effect of having gone to a SPAC, having, say, redemptions of their shares prior to the business combination. Again, I know I'm talking sort of at 12th grade level here, but basically, they are not having to worry about the money holding out because, their investment, came, sort of direct rather than through a SPAC. With the government and the SEC looking so closely at SPACs, changing the rules, making them much more like IPOs, you've got some questions about that particular strategy, which, was huge for a year and a half and then began to lose a little bit of luster. And then the SEC started to turn its eyes towards it and look at it and regulate it closer. So right now there's not a lot of SPACs that are going forward. We saw Transfix the other day delay its SPAC. I was talking, about Vector IQ, which brought Nikola public back in June of 2020. They have a SPAC pending right now. They don't have a target or a company that they're looking to align with. So maybe they end up giving the money back to the investors. I mean, that's what has to happen after 2 years in most cases if you have not picked a company to bring public. And right now, it's not a great environment. It's a horrible environment for IPOs. It's terrible for SPACs. Even private equity deals are not happening at any kind of regularity at this point. And we're just in a real kind of a mucky period of time to do these deals.
Absolutely notes that market flip that happened really quickly. Very, very fast before we let you go, Alan, the coverage for what's going on with Nikola for the rest of the week. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're going to be doing to cover it and then where people can find that?
Yeah. Okay. So we've got two things going on right now with Nikola. We did write a commentary the other day that talked about the long shadow of Trevor Milton, and I think that's something that's still out there on our site. Basically, you've got two things. The first thing that's going on right now is a vote, or counting the votes, if you will, the proxies for a proposition to increase the number of authorized shares in Nikola from 600 million to 800 million. They've only got a little bit of the current authorization left that they can use to cut deals, to either issue senior debt or somehow raise money. There's only about 33 million shares left of that original 600 million. And so they need this this other authorization, which we did back in the envelope numbers, be about $1.5 billion in terms of what it could be worth, depending, on the stock price. And so they need to get this passed. They've taken extraordinary measures. Yesterday, CEO Mark Russell came out with a message. Steve Gursky, the chairman of Nikola, did a webinar last week. All of these things are fascinating public approaches to sort of your retail traders saying, look, we really need your vote here. And the reason they need the vote is because Trevor Milton, the founder and the former executive chairman, voted against this. He has about 11% of the company, plus he votes the shares of a big number of shares that he and Mark Russell, the CEO, own together, but Milton has the voting rights. He voted against this proposal. Did he do that out of spite? Maybe, but he certainly was thinking about dilution, because if you have more shares authorized than those who own present shares, their shares aren't worth as much. So you can understand why he might have done that. But he's been nettlesome to the company ever since he left in September of 2020. The other story that's going on, and we have a conference today, not we, but they in the court in the Southern District of New York, there's a conference today to decide whether to delay Milton's trial, because last week, in addition to the 3 fraud charges that came down in July a year ago, the government added another charge to the indictment. And so Milton's defense team is saying, look, we need 30 more days just to figure out what to do about this. So there's a lot of brinksmanship going on right now between the two sides there. So Nikola is along for the ride, unfortunately. I mean, they're in mediation with Milton to get back the $125 million that Nikola agreed to pay the SEC because of statements that Milton made. And, so this is all going to play out slowly, but it's kind of a fascinating time, really.
Definitely fascinating indeed. And Alan will be sure to cover or follow your coverage of this story as it continues to develop. Thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks, guys. Have a great day.
You as well, Alan. We'll talk to him Friday morning as well for the next edition of Truck Tech. Right now, we're going to head over to the wall. We've got our first carrier update of the morning.